What is the difference between an internet hub and an internet switch? This is such a good question, and you guys are about to learn so much about super nerdy networking stuff, so buckle up. So a hub and a switch both look almost identical, and they have very similar use cases, on paper at least. And that use case is taking one single input and plugging it into multiple different outputs or multiple devices. This is a super common use case in the case of Ethernet because you usually only have the one cable coming out of your wall, but you want to get wired Ethernet to your computer and to your Xbox and to your TV box. To do that, you're going to have to put a device in the middle that splits the signal. This is either a hub or a switch. So before I break down both of them, a little bit of a spoiler, hubs pretty much don't exist anymore. They're super outdated technology, and almost every time you think you need a hub or you think you're talking about a hub, you're talking about an Ethernet switch. So we're going to look at hubs first so you understand the issue with them. So the biggest difference between a hub and a switch is a hub is a mostly passive device. So when you look at the inside of the hub, all it's doing is taking one signal from the Ethernet source and just sending it down all of the different tracks to all of the different devices. So if it's sending this red signal, it's going to send that red signal and just split it three ways, and that same signal is going to go to all of the devices. Now, at first glance, this might look okay because all of the devices are receiving the red Ethernet signal, but this simply isn't how Ethernet works. Ethernet is a constant conversation between the Ethernet source itself and the device. So not only is there data going up to the devices, but there's also data coming back. And Ethernet and the device need to be able to talk to each other back and forth very precisely. The problem with it all going through this one pipeline is by the time it gets to this juncture here, the source of the Ethernet doesn't know what device sent that signal, and when it's sending it back, it doesn't know where to send it, because it's kind of just spewing it out to all the devices. This is a very simplified explanation, but it's why a splitter like this pretty much can't work in our modern Ethernet setups. For the sake of completeness, I will mention that hubs are still used in some very niche situations where you need to send one single piece of data to a bunch of devices. 3D printing farms are a really good example of this, where you need to send one 3D print file to a whole bunch of different printers and they don't really need to talk to each other. That's where you might see a hub actually implemented. Now, moving on to the switch, which is how you would actually solve this problem, you'll see the diagram here looks really similar, except for this one piece in the middle here where the junction is. So with the switch, instead of having the signal blindly split and just sent out to all of the devices, there's this processor here in the middle at the junction that processes all the data that's going both ways. Now, the way that this processor works, just like we were talking about last time, if the device requests data from the Ethernet, let's say the TV box is requesting a TV show, it's not only going to request that data, but it's also going to effectively sign the data and tell the processor what device is requesting it. So in this case, it's going to say, hey Ethernet, send me this TV show. It's the TV box asking. That's going to go process through the processor. That'll get sent to the Ethernet. The Ethernet's then going to respond with the TV show. And once it reaches the processor, it's going to say, here's the TV show. This TV show is for the TV box. And then it's only going to send it up that TV box line. And it's able to do that all at once, thousands of times a second, so every single device effectively has its own independent link to the single Ethernet cable. An interesting fact here to help you guys learn a little bit more, when the device signs the data, that's what's called a MAC address. You might have heard of that before, and that's where these come into play. The difference between hardware splitting and software splitting like this is also called layer 1 versus layer 2 in the networking world, layer 1 being hardware, layer 2 being software. The more you know. Anyway, that's hubs versus switches. Like I said, hubs you'll probably never actually use when you're thinking hub. You're probably thinking switch, but I hope that helped offer some context. There is one more device that we didn't talk about here called a splitter, but they're super cursed and you've probably never seen one or used one before. I could dig into that after, but it's pretty far outside of the scope of this video. That being said, let me know if you guys have any questions down there in the comments. I am happy to help. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you.